Hello everyone, welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Today in this session we are going to have a discussion on the newspaper of 10th of May 2024. So let's begin with the list of articles first, but before that there is a quick reminder for all of you. There is a workshop that we are going to conduct on 12th of May at 11 a.m. in the morning. And this is something which is going to be very helpful for everyone who's preparing for IAS Examination Civil Services 2025. So do attend this session if you are somebody who's looking to prepare for the next year's exam. Now let's begin with the list of articles. Now these are the 4 articles that we are going to have a detailed discussion on today. So first is an editorial that we have on page number 10. This is related to some of the concerns related to AI. Then Supreme Court stops granting of fresh mining leases renewal in Aravalis. So something that we have been discussing in the past also, we'll discuss that. Then we need to stop the fear mongering on vaccine. So recently we have seen that there have been some controversies regarding the AstraZeneca Covishield vaccine. So we'll discuss upon that. And then lastly, could bird flu turn into the next pandemic? A very important article because this is something that is constantly in the news, so we'll try to understand the aspects of it. Then from the perspective of your prelims examination, we have these 3 articles today. First, UK girls hearing restored after groundbreaking gene therapy. So we'll discuss in a brief about what exactly has happened and some of the things related to the background of it. Then China's aircraft carrier Fujian completes 8-day sea trial. So a simple article and we'll discuss about some brief detail about it. And then there are 2 new COVID variants that we'll discuss. And then lastly, from the perspective of revisited articles, we have what US is saying that they would stop supplying weapons to Israel if Israel launches an attack in Rafah. So let's begin with the first article, and this is on your editorial page today. An AI-infused world needs matching cybersecurity. Now, the context of this article is generative AI. Now, with generative AI, what we see is that there has been a huge change in the entire segment of artificial intelligence. In the last couple of years especially, we have seen that there are a lot of new aspects of AI that we have started using, and generative AI is one of the most important aspects of it. So what is generative AI? Let's start with that. So generative AI, when it comes to it, the meaning of generative AI is that we are talking about a kind of artificial intelligence where we can create new content. And creating new content meaning creating an image, a video or anything like that, or text for example. And this is something which is indistinguishable from the content created by humans. So until now, before generative AI came in, artificial intelligence as we knew was more of data analysis, understanding of something, helping in something. So all these kind of things. So where we were looking at processing of data more or analyzing of data from that perspective. But now with the advent of generative AI, we can generate data. We can create data, we can create videos, we can create audio, we can create images, we can create text. So there are all these possibilities that we have with generative AI. So for example, this image that you see right here. So very famous image, Mona Lisa, right? But Mona Lisa with a twist, with a mohawk. So what you have to do is simply go to some website or any AI based software, especially let's say when it comes to something like a DAL-E. So you just have to go there, give instructions about what you want, and you will get an image accordingly. So for example, if you type there that I need Mona Lisa with a mohawk, you'll get an image like this. So that's why getting these kind of images, creating these images is so easy now. Then there is the context of deepfake also. This very famously was seen as an example of deepfake. You look at 4 Obamas here, and can you tell me which of the 4 Obamas is actually saying something and the rest are actually not the actual videos but rather deepfake videos that have been created with sampling of Obama. So even these kind of things are possible today. with generative AI, doing all these will not take a lot of time. So for example, tomorrow what one can do, let's say if I wanted, let's say if I have to do the Hindu analysis and I don't want to wake up in the morning. So what do? First, I have to sample my voice. I have to provide my voice or some of my audio clips or my video clips to the AI so that they would be able to replicate my voice. So my voice gets replicated, one job is done. Secondly, somebody needs to read out. So you need to fit my voice in maybe some of my videos. So you have to do that then, and that can also be done. And then what will happen is that the lip sync will work in a manner where it will look like I am actually speaking, but in reality I was sleeping at my home and it was just a deepfake video that was speaking. And even the script can be given and the script can be read out by this particular deepfake video. So doing all this today is possible, and I'm not even talking about a distant future. It is something that is possible today. You'll see that Microsoft also has come out with its new AI where they can actually create the entire video just from your image. If they have a picture of you, they have a photograph of you, they can create an entire video out of just that image, just by having that particular image. So doing all this is possible today. So that's why with generative AI we see that the world is changing and the AI world is looking towards a kind of transformation which can be very good, but at the same time it comes with a lot of challenges. And this is where the articles comes in. So article, for example, it starts with one case that happened in the US, where a mother in US, she received a distressing call from some individuals who claimed that they have kidnapped her daughter. But the voices were fabricated using generative AI to just extort money. So this alarming incident, it highlighted the dangers of artificial intelligence and raised concerns in the US Senate as well. And cyber criminals, they are increasingly using generative AI to manipulate people and organizations. So that's why when it comes to generative AI, while it becomes very beneficial in various different sectors like education, healthcare, even agriculture, for example, but it also presents a significant risk. Recent report have documented a surge in the phishing emails. So for example, we have seen that there is a rise in phishing emails and almost 967% rise in credential phishing since late 2022 because of artificial intelligence. Now what we see is that there is a cybersecurity firm called as Deep Instinct, and Deep Instinct, so the name of this organization is Deep Instinct. Now they found that 75% of the professionals, they reported a rise in cyber attacks, and almost 85% attributing to generative AI. So 75% of cybersecurity professionals, they have reported that there has been a rise in cyber attacks, and out of all these attacks, 85% of them are related to AI. And that's why this becomes dangerous, and these sophisticated threats, they require organizations to adapt very quickly. Now there are new risks, for example cognitive behavior manipulation and exploiting the biometric systems as well, where it puts the privacy into complete risk. Though when it comes to artificial intelligence, it has improved productivity, and 70% of the professionals, they have cited that although there are increased attacks, and there are completely undetectable phishing, and there are privacy concerns that they have raised. So that's why what we understand here is that we need collaborative solutions. They become essential to safeguard the data and the human rights. So that's why this is something that becomes very, very crucial. And in this context, what we see is that the world leaders, they have signed agreement to tackle the misuse of artificial intelligence on developing ethical frameworks to try and enhance the safety. Now, so that's why this basically was that's why this this agreement was signed by or rather a declaration was signed by various different countries, like even China, US and all the other countries, they also signed this. So the name, if you know, it was Blakely Declaration. Sorry, declaration. So this declaration has been signed by most of the important, I mean, bigger countries where AI is being used extensively. So we see that they are trying to establish an ethical framework here. Now, at the same time, we need stronger watermarking systems as well, which could help identify the images that are AI generated content. And while corporate training and digital literacy, these are things that can empower the employees also to recognize and prevent such attacks. But there is a long way to go. I'll give you an example that although watermarking systems have started, so for example, let's say if you look at the newer phones that have come, that for example, if you are using the newer Samsung phones like S23 and S24 Ultra, etc., or the Z Fold 5, etc., so the new operating system that they have introduced, that is One UI 6.1 or something, if you see that they do generate AI based images, they can modify your images based on AI with the help of AI, but they do a small watermarking at somewhere at the corner. So that watermarking is an indicator that this was an AI generated image. So that's good that you can do the watermarking, but at the same time, the same phone also has various ways in which you can erase an object. So you can go and just erase the watermark. So on one hand, yes, they have introduced something that is good, because at least it will tell you that okay, this was an AI generated image, but at the same time you can even edit that AI generated image and remove the watermark from there. So then that doesn't help. So somebody who's not looking to go ethical or do something which is by the law, by the morals and by the ethics, then in that case they have multiple options available where they can manipulate all this. So that's why when it comes to, let's say, the use of AI and having ethical frameworks available and getting this agreement in place so that we can tackle AI misuse, we know that more than what the government agencies or the governments would be misusing for, the problem really lies with the crime, the cyber security, where somebody is actually looking to harm. And when somebody is actually looking to harm, this is where the problem lies, and that is what needs to be tackled. So ultimately, we need a holistic approach. There is a holistic approach that is needed, which involves maybe governments, NGOs and industries to educate people and to build a resilience in terms of defense against the evolving cyber threats that we see in an AI-driven landscape in today's world. So that's why this is something that becomes crucial, that we across institutions, industries and public is necessary to strengthen the cyber security measures and reduce the AI-driven threats. Now coming to the next article, Supreme Court has stopped granting of fresh mining leases renewals in Aravalis. Now what we have basically seen is that the Supreme Court has temporarily halted the issuance of new mining leases and renewals within the Aravali ranges and the hills. Now according to a Forest Survey report, Forest Survey of India report, these areas, when it comes to the Aravalis, they include the hills and a consistent 100-meter buffer zone around them. Now this decision is something that was issued by a special bench where we had Justice B.R. Gavai and A.S. Oka. The ruling basically permits the states where the Aravali ranges are located to assess these applications for mining leases and the renewals, but it also prohibits any kind of new mining activities in the Aravali Hills and Aravali Hills as defined in the Forest Survey of India report. Now, the court has clarified that this is not a ban on lawful mining activities with valid permissions and licenses. That's why they emphasize that it's an outright ban actually could unintentionally also promote illegal mining. So that's why what the court said, that it is it has prohibiting new mining activities in the defined areas. It emphasized that it is not a ban on lawful mining activities within the permitted areas, but it is something which tries to prevent illegal activities. So now, when it comes to this order, it will impact the states of Delhi, Rajasthan, Haryana, and Gujarat. Now, overall, when it comes to illegal mining and what happens with illegal mining, the problem has been how the misuse of these areas are done, and how the many a times proper permits are not in place, and very easily somebody is getting the grants, and it becomes very easy for many of these mining activities to happen in these areas, which is sad many a times, because we know that it has drastic implications for the environment. And that's why many of these areas which are ecologically sensitive areas, they also are widely misused for many of these kind of activities. So that's why many a times it remains important that Supreme Court once in a while intervenes, because otherwise when it comes to the state governments, there is no guarantee how the state governments would handle many of these projects. And at an individual level, many a times the processes, the permissions, etc., can vary from state to state. So that's why from that perspective it becomes very, very crucial that Supreme Court has taken cognizance of these kind of effects. Now, the next article, and a very, very important article in the context of some of the discussions that have been going on in the recent past, we need to stop the fear mongering on vaccines. This is an article that we have on the science page towards the end of the newspaper today. Now, what we have seen is that the COVID-19 pandemic, it has actually amplified an existing fear, or you can say the fringe anti-vaccine movement that actually has gained traction even among some of the healthcare professionals. Now, what we know is that there is an apprehension, there have been apprehensions about the vaccine, but in the context, in the current context, what we have seen is that a lot of healthcare professionals, including people who are from the pharma background, even they are the ones who are also among people who are kind of, you can say, a part of the anti-vaccine movement. So that's why this is something that can lead to a devastating reality. When it comes to the spread of this disinformation, it is something that was fueled by a quote submission by AstraZeneca that revealed that its COVID-19 vaccine, which is in a form Covishield in India, could in very rare cases lead to blood clots due to thrombosis when we look at this particular scenario. So that's why what we basically see is that it might lead to thrombocytopenia syndrome. Now, this is what they had submitted in the court. Now, although when it comes to this information is not new. It is something that has been misconstrued to suggest that increase in heart attacks and strokes among the youth is happening because of this. In reality, this TTS, this is something that remains extremely rare, which is something which occurs only in 2-3 people per million who are vaccinated. And mostly also it affects people who are young and fit. So when it comes to, let's say, the risk benefit analysis, what we have seen is that mainly it has been found in the problems have been found in people who are young, and women and men also, but in women it has been affecting a lot more. So but when you look at the rarity of the cases, we are saying 2-3 people per million, that out of 10 lakh cases 2 or 3 people might see this kind of a risk. Now when it comes to India, in India a risk benefit analysis has supported a continued use of Covishield due to the higher protection that it has provided against very severe COVID-19 strains. And that's why it is something that outweighs the rare risk of TTS in India. Now, in case of Europe, what we have seen is that in the European countries where they have ample amounts of mRNA vaccines also available, we see that they have paused the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine, but India has limited alternatives. So that's why relying on Covishield for mass vaccination makes sense in case of India. Now when it comes to TTS, TTS may be also linked to the recombinant DNA vaccines like the Johnson and Johnson vaccines that we have seen. Now, in case of TTS, what we see is that when it comes to, let's say, the recombinant DNA vaccines, we see that there are slight risks that have been observed. However, when we look at the protective benefits of Covishield, that was significant, that reduced Covishield severity and long-term complications. It is something that becomes very crucial in to understand from the perspective of India. Now, while when we look at the alternatives, for example, when we look at the protein subunit vaccines that also exist, Covishield was essentially very crucial in addressing the pandemic in India. Furthermore, when we look at the data from the Western countries, that shows that COVID-19 infections itself, they substantially raise the risk of clotting disorders. So that's why clotting disorders, even if they are happening in people, they might not be exactly due to vaccination, but also because of COVID-19 itself. Because one might also say that COVID-19 has never left. We still keep see that there are resurgence of some variants or the others that keep happening from time to time. So that's why when it comes to the key lesson is that there is no vaccine. Just understand this, that there is no vaccine which is perfect. And the choices, they have to be made based on the available data and the circumstances. So that's why despite the concerns, vaccination is something that remains very crucial in preventing COVID-19 complications. So that's why the narrative around TTS, that TTS should not, so we need to understand that this narrative around TTS, it should not overshadow the immense benefit of the vaccines. And it is something which is very vital to continue, especially when it comes to India's vaccination efforts while trying to push back against the disinformation in case of COVID-19. So that's why it is very crucial that even when you look at Covishield and when you understand the data with Covishield, what we have seen is that Covishield remains very effective, especially for the vulnerable groups. By vulnerable groups, I mean people who are elderly, people who are aged, also people who have some comorbidities like diabetes. For them, Covishield has been seen as a better vaccine compared to, let's say, the inactivated vaccines like Covaxin, which are better for people who are young, who are healthy, who have a better immune system. For them, Covaxin is a good vaccine. But at the same time, when it comes to the vulnerable groups, we have seen that the effect of the vaccine has been much better in the vulnerable groups, and also the chances of developing these kind of rare TTS etc. have been much lesser in the elderly and the people who are already suffering with some of the other diseases. So these are also some of the data points that need to be understood in the context of this discussion. Now moving on to the next article, and this again is a very crucial discussion that we have seen in the past couple of months. Could bird flu turn into the next pandemic? Now what have we seen? Several Indian states, including Kerala, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, they have been urged by the government to stay alert following the detection of a highly pathogenic avian influenza, which is known as H5N1. H5N1, which has now spread to even cattle in some of the states in US also. So in this context, we are also going to discuss another article, and this is an article that was published in the Nature Journal. This was published in the Nature Journal on 8th of May. So we'll discuss about this. This is a very important article in the context of what we are discussing. So I have taken some of the aspects from what this article had published. At the same time, my suggestion to you is also that please go back to the news analysis that we did on 5th of May. On 5th of May, the second article that I had discussed, was exactly related to what I am discussing today. So I am not going to discuss whatever I discussed on 5th of May. Please go back to that information and please read from there, understand from there. I am going to continue from there on. Alright. So now, when it comes to bird flu, so what we have seen is that in India, some of the states have been put on alert, and in US, we have seen that bird flu has also now spread to cattle. Now, in this context, when we look at the World Health Organization, the World Health Organization basically has also warned, it has expressed significant concern regarding the increase in spread of this particular virus due to into various different species, including even humans. Now, they have cautioned, all right, they have cautioned about the risk of the virus mutating to infect humans also, and potentially gaining the ability for even human to human transmission. Until now, no human to human transmission has been confirmed yet. But the problem is the mortality rate. The mortality rate in case of bird flu infections in humans is very high. If you look at the data, the mortality rate is at 52%. What we have seen is that almost out of 900 odd cases that have been documented, approximately 460 deaths have been seen on this. To be exact, 889 documented human cases have been seen in 23 countries in the past 15 months. Out of these 889 cases, we have reported 463 deaths. So that's why the mortality rate is very, very high in terms of the human infections in bird flu. In India, the central government now has noted something called as the highly pathogenic avian influenza, which was first detected in Maharashtra back in 2006. And this is something that is leading to an annual outbreak in various different regions. Now, this disease has affected at least 24 states until now, and it has led to culling of almost 9 million birds. And when it comes to the vaccination also, vaccination against this highly pathogenic avian influenza, it has not been allowed in India yet due to concerns about the disease becoming endemic or the infections remaining undetected in certain cases. So that's why we have seen that until now we have not really allowed the use of these vaccines. Now, coming to this particular article that was discussed, this was published in the Nature journal a couple of days back. Now, it talks about the cases that we have seen in the US. Now, first there were concerns about whether the milk of this cattle is also infected, but then that was ruled out. Concerned about the pasteurized milk in the US containing this H5N1 avian influenza virus, they have been put aside, but the virus is increasingly seen as a potential long-term problem in cows. What the scientists are worried about is that cattle could become a persistent reservoir for this virus, and this is something that increases the opportunities for this virus to mutate and infect the humans. So this is where the concerns have been raised. So the concern is that when it comes to the cattle, cattle could become long-term reservoir. For this particular virus, for the H5N1 virus. Alright, so this is a possibility. Now, the recent studies, they have revealed that H5N1 can actually jump between cows and birds, which allows it to spread over vast regions. And although this H5N1 is deadly to many of the mammals, most of the infected cows, they have shown no severe symptoms. And that's why it has made the detection without testing very, very difficult. So that's why cows become a concern, because cows will be able to handle that virus. I mean, it might become endemic in the cows. So without any detection, they might just remain there. And when it comes to cows, just understand this. Cows can actually carry multiple different flu virus types. And that's why it leads to potential mixing of the genetic material to form probably new strains that can very easily probably also infect humans. So that's why we have to understand this aspect very well. That when it comes to cows, cows can carry multiple flu virus. Alright, they can carry multiple flu virus types, and that is why what we might see is that it might lead to genetic mixing. This might lead to genetic mixing, and thus the mutation. And this mutation that might happen, this might lead to new strains that could easily infect humans. So that's why the concerns with regard to cows. Now what we have seen is that the US Department of Agriculture, they have found that the virus actually jumped from wild birds to cattle back in late 2023. So that's why cows act as effective mixing vessels for different flu viruses, because they generally don't die from this H5N1 and may swap the viral genes over time. So that's why it might so happen that in a cow there are multiple different genes of different kinds of flu virus, and their genes might start to mix. So in this case what happens is that they wouldn't die, severe infections do not develop in cows, but now they would create new strains. And when it comes to H5N1, it infects the different species equally well. And that's why it allows it to develop adaptations also to thrive across species. Now this cross species infectivity that we are looking at, it is something that could also lead to more transmittable strains. And due to their prevalence and the human interactions, cows are very significant reservoir risk. Because we know that when it comes to cattle and the interaction with the cattle and interaction with the cow, humans are very closely living with the cows. And take example of India as well. Forget about the Western countries. We know that we very closely live with the cows, and if cows start becoming a reservoir, the chances of the virus jumping from the cows to the humans, this risk also elevates. Now, when it comes to, let's say, poultry, until now in the case of bird flu, we have seen that poultry culling has controlled the avian flu, right? But it is impractical for us to even think that cattle culling can be done at all. So that's why it's impractical for cattle, right? Due to the economic importance that the cattle has and the disease resilience that we see in cattle. And it's unclear how the virus spreads between the herds, because when it comes to wild birds contaminating cattle feed and water supplies probably are likely vectors, but we do not really know whether that happened, right? So that's why what we know is that jumping of the species, they have happened from wild birds. So wild birds to cows. Wild birds to cows, it has happened. Probably it has happened from contaminated food and water. I'm writing likely because we do not know for sure whether this happened. Now, so that's why when it comes to, so at the same time what we understand is that when it comes to farm equipment and possible airborne transmission, they are also suspected. So that's why either contaminated food or water is likely, or it could be due to farm equipment, and it might have been airborne as well. It could have been airborne, or it could have been because of different farm equipments. So we are not sure. Now, testing cattle before the interstate transportation happens, that is something that according to researchers might help in understanding the spread. Vaccination could also become an option if airborne transmission is confirmed. However, when it comes to the infection data among humans, it is a data which is limited. A recent study, it confirmed that one mild case in Texas, a dairy worker was seen. But again, there is no large evidence of any severe human transmission from the cattle. Understand this. From the birds, we know that the transmissions have been happening. But from the cattle, we still do not know. So one mild case has been seen in the Texas in US, but that was also very mild. So there are concerns that undetected infections could accumulate dangerous mutations over time, and then it might lead to spread. So if that happens, then in the humans it can become a very dangerous problem. because until now, thankfully, we haven't seen any human to human transmission of the disease. A disease, for it to become a pandemic, for it to become an epidemic, before that, it needs to transmit within humans, that from one infected humans, if another human is getting infected, this is what creates a problem. But until the time that doesn't happen, probably we are safe. But it is something that has been raised as a concern now, because the number of occurrences of bird flu is rising, jumping of species has started, that mammalian species like cattle are now getting infected. So now human cases have been detected, just that human to human transmission has not happened yet, and that is something where we have to ensure that we stop it. Otherwise, once human to human transmission begins, if at all it begins, this is what can lead to a very dangerous trend, and that's what has been discussed in these two articles. The article that has been published in the Hindu today, and the article that was published in the Nature journal a couple of days back. Now, coming to the prelims based articles, the first article that we have is on page number 18, and this is UK girls hearing restored after groundbreaking gene therapy. Now, this is very unique that for the first time, with the help of gene therapy, we have been able to restore hearing in a girl. So, an 18-month-old British girl, Opal, she is the one who was born without hearing faculty, but she is believed to be the youngest person to have their hearing restored after undergoing groundbreaking new gene therapy developed by the US biotech firm Regeneron. So that's why this is a wonderful news and a big achievement in the context of gene therapy, because when it comes to gene therapy, what we know is that how gene therapy works is, when it comes to gene therapy, the basics of gene therapy is what? What is gene? Gene carries the various different, you can say, properties that an individual has. Everything that you are, or everything that your appearance, whether it is your appearance or your entire personality, it could be basically shaped by genes. So, for example, color of the eye, color of the skin, the height, etc. All these things basically can be due to the genes that we have. Now, in this context, when we look at this gene, when it comes to the gene, that's why we know that it is responsible for the properties, they define the properties in an organism, right? So, gene therapy is what? Gene therapy is some kind of either modification in a gene, addition of a gene, or maybe removal of a gene to make some positive change. So, for example, let's say there is a disease that has happened in someone. So, that disease is happening because of an improperly working gene. There is a gene which is not actually working properly. So, that's why that problem happened. So, what do? We can either replace that gene, take out that gene and replace it with a new one, or maybe it is because maybe just remove that gene. Removal of the gene also does the work, or maybe there is an absence of the gene. There is absence of some kind of gene because of some kind of disease or deformity might have developed. So maybe adding that gene can also work. So there are different ways in which gene therapy works, and all these ways we see that it becomes crucial. So gene therapy, that's why it can be about either adding a missing gene, or removing a diseased gene, or replacing a gene. Or even you can say modifying a gene. So there are all these things that we can do, and by doing all this, this is how gene therapy basically works. So that is what we have done here, and we have had this very, very important development. Now the next article today is China's aircraft carriers Fujian completes 8-day sea trial. Now here, the only thing that I would say is more important here is the fact about what exactly has happened and the name of this particular vessel of China. Now, overall, when it comes to this particular article, that's why this article talks about the aircraft carrier that China has called as Fujian. Now, in this context, when it comes to Fujian, what we see is that it has successfully completed its 8-day maiden sea trial. So that's why, just remember, these are some of the important aspects of it. Now, this is something that marks a significant step forward in China's naval capabilities. Because when it comes to Fujian, it is a 80,000 ton super carrier, which is equipped with electromagnetic catapults, and it is something that can launch aircraft, which makes China the second country after the US to field this advanced technology. Now, according to the China military, the China military online, what we basically see is that Fujian has tested its propulsion, the electrical systems, and all the other equipments, and that's why it has achieved the expected results during the trials. Now, that's why this is something that becomes very crucial. And when it comes to this carrier, it was launched back in June 2022, and it has been named after the eastern China province, which is Fujian. And this is something that it is reportedly constructed using, when it comes to China is also constructing a new, possibly nuclear powered carrier as well, a super carrier as well, and that is something that indicates a rapid expansion in the maritime powers of China. So China's naval development, that's why they are being very closely monitored by India also, so that we understand what's happening here. And that's why when it comes to Indian Navy, it operates two carriers. We know that one is INS Vikramaditya and the other one is INS Vikrant. And these two also have been commissioned, and INS Vikrant was commissioned in September 2022. So the Indian Navy is also seeking approval to also build a second indigenous aircraft carrier called as the IAC-2. We are also building the IAC-2, which you can say more or less is a look-alike of Vikrant, which is a replica, you can say, of Vikrant. So that's why we have seen that it has been approved by the Defense Procurement Board, but the Defense Acquisition Council has still not given a go-ahead. And we have to also understand that even if we build a new carrier, it takes almost 8 to 10 years to complete if the core design, engines and all the propulsion systems are retained. So that's why we have to understand that we need to move fast in these kind of situations. Now, coming to the next article, all about FLiRT, the new COVID-19 variant. Now, what we have seen is that there are new COVID-19 variants. One is KP2 and one is KP1.1, and these are known as FLiRT variants. Now, when it comes to this, we see that they are actively circulating, and that's why it has sparked concerns globally. Now, they basically are descendants on Omicron, the Omicron variant itself. The Omicron variant that we had, that is JN.1. So that's the strain from where they have spread. Now, the Infectious Disease Society of America, they have reported that these variants, they have led to increased COVID-19 cases and hospitalizations in the US. And there are certain similar trends that are also now observed in the UK, in South Korea, and also in New Zealand. Now, when it comes to India, in case of India, what we have seen is that we have detected a total of 238 cases, 238 cases of KP.2, and we have seen almost 30 cases of KP 1.1, and this is as of May 6th. As of May 6th, this is the number that we have seen in India. Now, these variants, they seem more transmittable and also immune invasive compared to the other Omicron subvariants, especially when it comes to KP.2, which has been able to bypass immunity from vaccines and some of the previous infections as well. And mostly when it comes to India, we have seen that these cases have been seen to be prevalent in Maharashtra, Odisha, Goa and West Bengal, and KP 1.1 in West Bengal, Maharashtra and Gujarat. Now the symptoms remain similar to the other Omicron variants, including sore throat, cough, fatigue and loss of taste and smell. The primary research that has been done in Japan, it has indicated that KP.2 also shows very strong immune evasion. And in this particular scenario, we see that they, even against the most updated vaccines, they have been seen to be evasive. So, however, when it comes to the existing vaccines, they can still help in reducing the severe COVID-19 cases. So that's why we have to understand that these kind of things are there, and that's why it has been emphasized that these periodic COVID-19 surges are now going to be routine, and that when it comes to the FLiRT variants, they actually represent a longer term challenge, and that's why enhanced surveillance and protective measures, they are needed to try and protect from this vulnerability. Now, despite the potential for increased transmission, there is no evidence that suggests that these variants, they cause severe illness. Transmission is happening, but severe illnesses are not happening. And precautionary measures, they remain essential, like maintaining hygiene, wearing the masks, staying home when unwell, keeping the vaccinations up to date. So there are all these things that still remain important in the context of this increasing threat. Now coming to the revisited article for the day. Now the revisited article here is US won't supply weapons to Israel if it launches attack on Rafah. Now President Joe Biden has expressed concern over civilian safety in Gaza and has announced that the US would not supply offensive weapons to Israel for an assault on Rafah, which is the last major Hamas stronghold. Now in an interview that he did with CNN, he reaffirmed that US support for Israel's defense, including providing the Iron Dome interceptors and other defense weapons, they would remain. However, he emphasized that the US would withhold the offensive arms and the artillery shells that could be used against Rafah, and where over 1 million civilians are actually seeking shelter right now. And this decision marks a very notable shift in the US policy, reflecting a growing concern over the civilian casualties from Israel's offense in Gaza, which has followed after the Hamas attack that happened on October 7th. Biden also noted that while Israel's actions around Rafah have not crossed the red lines, according to him, Israel must do more to protect the civilian lives. And that's why we see that it has been confirmed that the US is going to delay the shipment of the high payload munitions to Israel. Now the withheld shipment, it actually included heavy bombs that could cause significant casualties in the densely populated urban areas in these regions. Now despite this, the Israeli military, it has emphasized that Israel possesses sufficient weaponry for its Rafah offensive, and it has maintained a strong relationship with the US, believing that any disagreement should be resolved privately, according to what Israel has said. But unfortunately, the way the things are moving forward, we need to understand that this could be a big humanitarian crisis in Gaza if Israel moves forward with what they are threatening. So although it's a welcome step from the side of US, but we still need to monitor what exactly happens and how the things go forward, because that will tell us the story of the future of how exactly this entire situation is being handled. All right. So with this, we come to the end of today's session. I hope that this session was helpful. Some of the articles, especially the first couple of articles that we have discussed, they are very crucial articles for your examination. So please do have a look and please ensure that you remember these things, especially from the perspective of your mains examination. Right? So with this, we come to the end of today's session. Thank you very much for being here.